issues with my last 3 videos, and that's because I was using the mic the wrong way around for some reason. But yeah, hopefully the quality of sound is a lot better in these videos and the future videos. I don't know like why I was using it the wrong way around when I've had this mic for ages now, but we live. So yeah, today's video I am going to be giving you some book recommendations for spooky season. I probably should have filmed this at the start of the month, but I've been busy. It has been, again, a whirlwind at the moment, so I'm doing it now. Hopefully maybe you could pick up one of these books in the next couple of weeks before Halloween. Why is it that when I sit down to film, the dogs are barking next door and there's a plane flying overhead? So annoying, but you know, we will just crack on with it. Before we start, please remember to subscribe. I am slowly getting back in to filming regularly. I'm going to try and do a few videos today, so if you see me in the same top and the same location in the next few videos, that is why. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into some of these book recommendations. The first book recommendation, which I think is a really good book to read around this time of year, is The Lighthouse Witches by C.J. Cook. This was one of the first books I picked up when I got back into reading at the end of 2022, and I remember really enjoying it. I will read you the back of each book. So this one says, a deserted lighthouse. Upon the cliffs of a remote Scottish island stands a lighthouse. Strange and terrible events have happened here. It started with a witch hunt. Now, centuries later, islanders are vanishing. A lost family. Liv Stay and her children don't believe in witches or curses, but within months of arriving on the island, her daughter Luna is the only one of them left. An impossible child. 20 years later, Luna's missing sister turns up out of the blue. She is exactly the girl Luna remembers. Same face, same smile, same age. Faced with the impossible, it's up to Luna to find out what really happened at the lighthouse all those years ago. And this book is really well written, as I remember like really enjoying it. It was one of those books that got me like back into reading. I remember like going and sitting in front of like a real fire and reading it, and it gave me all like the spooky, eerie, mysterious vibes. It like reminds me of like a rainy, dark day, if that. But yeah, and the plot, I remember it like rounded it up well. I can't remember like any plot holes. I just remember thinking like the story was good. It was very like eerie, and it kept me on the edge of my seat, and I enjoyed like the explanation of everything at the end. It's not like a short book, but it's not a long book either. The writing is quite big, so it is one that I think you can get through quite quickly. So yeah, The Lighthouse Witches. This is one that I have recommended to like my mum and stuff as well. I would be interested in reading more by C.J. Cook. I think there was another book that she'd written that seemed really good. I can't that around this time of year, picking up any book by this author would be a good idea, but I am going to recommend one of their books, and that is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I have read 4 Grady Hendrix books, and this is my favourite for sure. But again, I think reading any of his books around this time is a good idea. He is a horror writer, and he writes really interesting horrors. And now a train has decided to go past. He writes really interesting horrors, which I would say they're like plots and premise are definitely different to kind of your average horror or thriller book. So I'm trying to find so it says, Patricia Campbell's life has never felt smaller. Her husband is a workaholic, her teenage kids have their own lives, her senile mother-in-law needs constant care, and she's always a step behind on her endless to-do list. The only thing keeping her sane is her book club, a close-knit group of Charleston women united by their love of true crime. Then James Harris walks into her life during the summer of 1993. He makes her feel things she hasn't felt in years, but when children on the other side of town go missing, Patricia wonders if he's connected. Is he a Brad Pitt, a Bundy, or something much worse? And as a mum, I really loved this book. I could relate to some of the women in this book. One thing about Grady Hendrix is, like horrors as well, is they've got like dark underlying comedy throughout them, which I really enjoy. And there's just something about the way he writes. He goes into like lots of details. His plots are like very well fleshed out, and he doesn't leave like any open ends or plot holes. And I got through this one really quickly. I also just love this edition of the book. It's one of those like floppy books. But yeah, this is definitely my favourite Grady Hendrix book so far. I have also read by oh my god, I can't remember what they're called. The My Best Friend's Exorcism, The Final Girls Support Club, and How to Sell a Haunted House. And yeah, this one is my favourite, and then probably How to Sell a Haunted House, which I read recently. But these are great. It's got like the right amount of horror, the right amount of gore, and yeah, just really well written. Next up, we have a fantasy, which is one of my favourite books that I read this year. I gave this 5 stars, and I remember when I was reading it, I was thinking this would be the perfect book to read in October because of how atmospheric it is, and that is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. It's the first in the Shepherd's King duology, and I absolutely loved it. I really, really loved it. I love a duology because like it's like with a standalone sometimes you need a little bit more, but it's not as daunting as a series, so I can't believe it took me this long to actually pick up this duology. Oh. And it says, so Elspeth Spindle needs more than luck to stay safe in the eerie, mislocked kingdom of Blunder. Like already, doesn't that just sound like the epitome of October? She needs a monster. She calls him the Nightmare, an ancient spirit trapped in her head. He protects her, he keeps her secrets. But nothing comes for free, especially magic. When Elspeth meets a mysterious highwayman on the forest, she is thrust into a world of shadow and deception. Together they embark on a dangerous quest to cure the town she might not be able to stop him. A maiden must unleash the monster within her to save her kingdom in this dark, lush, gothic fantasy debut. And that's what it is. It just has so many like gothic elements. The in the environment and the location where it's set, like the descriptions, are just so good, and it just takes you to this like I don't know how to describe it. I always describe it as like a really dark, misty, rainy, like castle. That's what I think of when I think of this, and it is delicious, definitely one to cozy up to on a dark autumn evening with some candles burning. The romance in this I really enjoyed as well, like the main male in it was just love. And again, very well written. I loved the magic system in this. It was different to any of any other magic systems that I've read about, so it was definitely refreshing as well. And yeah, this has been one of my, I think this is like my second favourite book that I've read this year, so I hope that you enjoy it as much as I did, if you do decide to pick it up. Next recommendation is a classic Gothic book, some Gothic literature. When I was at school, my favourite genre was Gothic classics, so this one is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. You may have had to read this in school. I actually didn't read it in school. I think I read it when I just left school. But yeah, a very famous, well-known novel written in, was it like the 1800s? I don't know. When was this written? So yeah, you can't beat some Gothic literature, especially in October. You know, there's The Turn of the Screw, Dracula, Jane Eyre, but my recommendation is The Picture of Dorian Gray. And it says, enthralled by his own exquisite portrait, Dorian Gray exchanges his soul for eternal youth and beauty. Influenced by his friend Lord Henry Wotton, he is drawn into a corrupt double life, indulging his desires in secret while remaining a gentleman in the eyes of polite society. Only his portrait bears the traces of his decadence. The Picture of Dorian Gray was a success at scandal. Early readers were shocked by its hints at unspeakable sins, and the book was later used as evidence against Wilde at his trial at the Old Bailey in 1895. So it is quite short as well, so it's not too difficult to get through. Obviously it was written in the 1800s, so it might be a bit different to what you're used to reading. Depends what you usually read. I find classic literature a little harder to read, just because the way that things were spoken and written back then is obviously different to how we now speak and the dialect we use, but definitely still one to pick up around this time. It still keeps you on the edge of the seats, and I just think because it was written in a time where these things weren't writing about these things was seen as a scandal. It's interesting to see the difference from then to now. So yeah, if you're wanting to dive into some classic literature and definitely get all those Gothic spooky vibes but with a great story, I would pick up The Picture of Dorian Gray. Also, a quick note I would also say about old Gothic literature is that even though some of the things that are described aren't as, they aren't like described in like as bluntly of like a gory way than like things are described in books nowadays. For some reason, the way things are described in these old books is like more grotesque. It feels more grotesque than some of the same elements written in modern books. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, but yeah. So then finally, I have like a Gothic fantasy romance book. I read this last year. I actually remember only giving this 3 stars, but I know so many people love this book, and I do think it's one that is really good to read around this time, because I think the like atmosphere and the location is written really, really well, and it's also like super easy to get through, and that is Gothic. And how do you say this author's name? Is it Runx? This. She's very popular on like Instagram, I think, or TikTok. This is the only book I have read by them, and it really does give all the Gothic spooky vibes. So it says, Corfina Clem is a woman with secrets. The last thing she expects to receive is an admission letter from the University of Verrenmoor, a place just as secretive. A castle atop a mountain, Verrenmoor is steeped in shadows, deceit and death. A place where students have been disappearing every 5 years for over a century. As Corfina becomes caught up in unravelling the clues to solve the mystery, her path collides with Vad Deverell, her enigmatic professor. Vad, too, is a man with secrets, and he cannot allow Corfina to get close enough to discover what he hides. But whenever she is near, his heart and soul yearn to possess her. As Corfina and Vad become more and more entangled, their passion for each other could be the very thing to solve the mystery of Verrenmoor, or it could bring them both down in flames. And it says at the top, if this is madness, she whispered almost against his lips, drown me in it. This reminds me of the TV series Wednesday. Like, this book was actually written before the TV series Wednesday like came out, but like they are so like similar, like the vibes are just like so similar. So if you enjoy that series, I think you will enjoy this book. Obviously this book has also like a more of a romance element in it, and a few spicy scenes. I also think the like element between student and professor is done well, as I can recall. Kind of like I wasn't a huge, I remember I wasn't like a huge like stan of how the romance was written, but it wasn't like bad. But I do think that if you're wanting a kind of like a romantasy that's perfect for this time of year, you might enjoy this one, especially with all the Wednesday vibes that go through it. And there is a big twist at the end. But yeah, a castle on top of a hill, like, can you get any more spooky than that? No. And a like secret school, university. So yeah, that would be my last recommendation for this video. Have you read any of these books? Let me know if you have. If you have got any recommendations for me to read, please let me know below. But apart from that, I shall see you